Welcome, everyone, to this Thriving Communities Grant Making Program information session where we'll cover the role of external application reviewers. My name is Crystal Lee Powell Jackson, and I'm a research environmental scientist at RTI International. RTI is an independent nonprofit dedicated to improving the human condition. We provide research, development, and technical services to local, state, and federal governments, nonprofits, and commercial clients worldwide. Within RTI, the Grant Maker program is held by the Transformative Research Unit for Equity, affectionately known as TRUE. And that division transforms traditional research practices and mindsets to reimagine and create systems that advance equity and social justice. RTI is responsible for supporting EPA's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant Making Program, Regions 4, 7, and National Central. Today's session will be recorded and available for replay. Next slide. So joining me today, I'm pleased to introduce the reviewer coordination team consisting of myself, as well as Sungyoung Cho and Candice Henry. Sungyoung will be helping to coordinate the question and answers session at the end of the webinar. Also joining us today are members from the Community Advisory Board coordination team and project management team. Next slide. So for today's session, we have three main objectives. We'll first present a quick overview of the Cultivating Healthy Environments, Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant Making Program, highlighting the goals and objective of the program. We'll then overview the application evaluation process, covering the steps and key players in the evaluation process. Lastly, we'll cover eligibility and expectations of external reviewers. We will also have time at the end for questions and answers, so please drop your questions in the Q&A section of the meeting, and we'll answer them throughout or at the end of the webinar. Next slide. So before we get started, we want to thank you for joining us today and expressing interest in serving as an external reviewer for the Cultivating Healthy Environments program. External reviewers will play a vital role by providing objective, informed evaluations of applications, ensuring fairness and transparency in the selection process, and contributing their technical, professional, or lived experiences to support community-driven solutions. So thank you. So let's get started. We'll review with a review of the intent and aims of the Cultivating Healthy Environments EJ TCGM program. Next slide. So EPA's EJ TCGM program is one of the largest investments to support capacity building in communities affected by environmental or public health issues. The program is designed as a pass-through model whereby EPA passes the funds through the grant makers to distribute and manage grants to community-based organizations more efficiently than the traditional federal grant process. As a whole, the TCGM program is designed to provide federal funds to CBOs and other eligible organizations to support the planning, assessment, and development of community-based projects. Next slide. To help meet the program goals, the project is funded under this program should directly benefit and empower communities to address local priorities. When reviewing and making decisions about applications, the reviewers and the community advisory boards will look at how well the proposed project respond to the aims of the program, which include addressing long-standing environmental and health challenges within historically underserved and disadvantaged communities, improving the health equity and resilience of underserved communities, and benefiting disadvantaged populations. Next slide. One of the primary goals of TCGM is to fund organizations that haven't traditionally received federal grants. In designing this program, we incorporated three principles: reducing barriers to assisting communities in developing and submitting successful applications by making those applications streamlined and easy. Centering communities, meaning community members are involved in the review and decision-making process. This is through our external reviewers and community advisory boards. We're also providing support through the application guidance and peer learning programs. In addition, the application and platform are intended to help make the application process much easier. Next slide. So the TCGM program consists of four opportunities. This includes foundational, non-competitive projects, assessment projects, Tier 1 assessment projects, Tier 2 planning projects, and Tier 3 development projects. And organizations have the opportunity to choose the program which best fits their project and the community needs. Next slide. So now we'll cover the steps and the key players of the review process. So applications are accepted on a rolling basis. And this table here shows that the targeted dates for each funding cycle and when those funding cycles will close. So we anticipate to have 10 funding cycles with 10 accompanying review cycles and funding decisions. We expect the review cycles to begin quarterly on the dates listed above. So once the funding cycle closes is when that review cycle starts, and we'll look to reviewers and CAB members to assess the program, and I'll get into that subsequent slides. Next slide. So our review cycle has 4 steps, and it culminates with the applicants receiving a notice of funding decision, with the goal of the application review process taking less than 3 months. Next slide. So the review process will start, a review cycle will start with the internal administrative review, where all submitted applications are evaluated by the Cultivating Healthy Environments team. This initial review ensures that applications meet basic requirements, including completeness, that the applicants are eligible, the budgets are accurate, and that the identification of any, and that we've identified any potential barriers for funding. And we expect this process to take less than 10 days. Next slide. The next step in the review process is the external review of applications. This is where external reviewers will come in. Each Tier 1, 2, and 3 application will be reviewed by 2 to 3 external reviewers. External reviewers will evaluate each application to ensure the projects are feasible, align with the goals of the program, and will benefit disadvantaged and underserved communities. The process is expected to take 2 weeks or less, and feedback will be shared with community advisory boards for their consideration. It's important to note that the external reviewers will not be asked if an application should be funded. The decision falls to the community advisory boards. And then non-competitive applications will not undergo external reviews and will move directly to the CABs for review. Next slide. So the next step in the review process is the Community Advisory Board review and determination. Each application will be assigned to 2 CAB members to review, and they will evaluate its strengths and weaknesses. These reviewers will assess the full application along with feedback from external reviewers and provide a recommendation to the full board regarding the application's funding status. Following this, the entire CAB will meet virtually to discuss all applications submitted during the funding cycle and make final funding decisions for each application, and expected to take that to take about 2 to 4 weeks. Next slide. And then the final step in the review process will be applicants receiving their notice of funding decision. For those whose applications are not funded, anonymous feedback from external reviewers and CAB members will be provided, and this constructive feedback can help applicants strengthen their submission for future funding cycles. Next slide. So now we'll cover eligibility and responsibilities of the external reviewers. So who are we looking for? We're looking for folks who are committed to the principles of environmental justice, who have experience addressing or living with environmental or public health issues. In addition, a subset of the applications will be reviewed by technical expertise. So we are looking for folks that not only have lived experience, but we're also looking for a subset of reviewers with technical expertise in environmental quality assessments or collecting and analyzing environmental samples, interpreting blueprints, or analyzing surveys and data. Reviewers must be authorized to work in the United States, have access to internet and a computer, smartphone, or tablet to access our application portal and provide feedback. Reviewers must not be a current employee of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency or a contracted position with the agency. Next slide. Reviewers will be compensated for their time and expertise. We expect each review to take about 1 to 2 hours, and reviewers will receive $100 for each application reviewed. Next slide. One of the key pillars of our project is to reduce barriers for communities to receiving funding. And this is why we have a goal of 3 months for applications receiving a notice of funding decision. For this reason, we expect reviewers to update their availability ahead of each review cycle so that we can rapidly match reviewers to applications when the funding cycle ends. We also expect reviewers to review assigned applications and provide feedback during the 2-week external review window. And last, and equally as important, being transparent about any potential conflicts of interest. Next slide. And so I'm going to go into conflict of interest in these next subsequent slides. A conflict of interest occurs when personal, professional, or financial interests may affect or seem to affect someone's fair and unbiased opinion. Controlling conflicts of interest ensure a fair, transparent, and unbiased review process, maintaining the integrity and credibility of funding decisions. For our program, a COI arises during a specific funding cycle if in the past 3 years you or a close relative have volunteered or worked with an applicant or partner organization, have served on the board, governing body, or professional appointment within an applicant or partner organization, or could receive direct financial benefits from an application under review. Next slide. And so we will be reviewing COIs 3 times during each cycle. And I'll cover those when those will happen in subsequent slides. But typically, a COI will not impact your involvement in a current funding or future funding cycle review. The team will use the information that you use to reduce any potential conflicts of interest. If at any time a COI arises while you're serving as a reviewer, you must notify the coordinating team as soon as possible by emailing tcgm_review@rti.org. And all of this will be provided in subsequent training materials. So no need to memorize that email. Next slide. So to get started in becoming a reviewer, you will fill out an application. The information collected in the application will be used to help us assign applications that match your skills and expertise. After you apply, you'll be able to review training materials which will be provided to you. In addition, if it's your first time serving as a reviewer, you will be invited to SM Apply, our application portal. These will help you all of these steps will help you prepare for the next review cycle. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, this is a quarterly funding cycle, and so we expect each review cycle to start when the quarterly funding cycle closes. And so we expect that applications will be assigned approximately 2 weeks after each of these review cycles close, just to give you a little bit of timing, what you can expect. So before each review cycle, you'll receive a survey assessing your availability for the upcoming review cycle. And this is when we'll also assess whether there's already a known conflict of interest. If you indicate you are unavailable during an upcoming review cycle or are submitting an application, it will not impact your ability to participate in subsequent review cycles, but you won't be participating in that current one. After notifying us of your availability, you can review materials, confirm you still have access to SM Apply, and prepare for application assignments if you are available that cycle. Next slide. So when the review cycle begins, you'll receive a notification that your applications have been assigned. At that time, you'll have 2 days to review assignments and confirm that there are no COIs within the specific applicants, individuals named in those application as well. And this is that second COI check. You'll have 2 weeks to complete the review and submit your feedback. And when you submit, we will ask you for the third and final time to confirm that a conflict of interest did not arise during the review of the application. Next slide. After the review cycle, the team will send you an invoice to review to ensure you're paid for your contribution to the Cultivating Healthy Environments grant-making program. We'll also request feedback on how the review cycle went and if there are any elements we can improve to continuously refine this process. At that point, you'll then wait for the next review cycle in 3 months, where we'll start again by confirming your availability for that review cycle. Next slide. So now we want to share some common questions we've received so far about reviewers. The first being, can you be a reviewer and an applicant? You cannot be a reviewer while you have an application under consideration for your region or national central. Once you push submit until a decision has been reached, you are ineligible to serve as a reviewer due to conflict of interest. And this is regardless of the type of funding, tier one, foundational. If you've submitted an application that introduces a conflict of interest, and you're unable to serve as a reviewer during that funding cycle. If you have an application in progress, you can still serve as a reviewer. And once you receive a decision, you are then eligible to review in the next cycle unless you resubmit. And this is through batching of review assignments and cycles that we're able to allow that. The next question, do external reviewers make funding decisions? No. The community advisory boards make the final funding decisions. Reviewers will not make final funding decisions, but instead they will give an early look at the application to support and provide information to the CABs, who are the final decision makers. Next question is, how many applications will external reviewers be assigned per cycle? And the number of applications will depend on the number of available reviewers, the number of applications received, and the limit reviewers set at each review cycle. And then the last question, will the presentation or meeting recording be shared? Yes, we will share a recording after the webinar, so keep an eye out for an email. If you don't receive it, please reach out to tcgm_review@rti.org or our other communication channels, and we're happy to provide that to you. Next slide. Thank you, Patrick. So before we jump into the question and answers, I do want to encourage you to join our mailing list and indicate that you're interested in serving as a reviewer. And I'll also do a plug if you're interested in serving as a CAB. You can click both of those, a CAB member. You can click both of those and complete the form on our Stay Connected page. And so you can scan the QR code there. I'm going to paste the website in the chat. So you can click on that and it'll take you to the form. So moving on. We hope that the slides provided a clear overview of the review process, key players, and what reviewers can expect. Now we'd like to open the floor to your questions and hear your thoughts. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A feature, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And if we are unable to get to your questions and we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with you. Thanks. Yang, I think you're muted. But I see the first question is how should we apply? So that information will be forthcoming soon. We are going to be sending out an email to to folks that attended the webinar and registered for the webinar with information about applying and getting started to be a reviewer.
Krista, can you put up the QR code again?
Yes, Patrick, can you leave that up while we do question and answers? Thanks, Patrick.
So next question came into the chat. How many applications will a reviewer receive at one time?
Great question. So all of that is dependent on the number of applications we receive and the number that the reviewer sets as a limit. So during the survey that comes out before the review cycle starts, we're assessing availability as well as assessing bandwidth for each reviewer. And so at that point, reviewers can set a limit on how much capacity they have for reviewing within the 2 weeks, and we'll aim to distribute applications based on that. For this first cycle, we're looking at around 3 to 5 applications. But again, keeping in mind that someone may only have the bandwidth to review one. And so I don't have a definitive number. I can give you a range. Folks are a quiet bunch. Well, feel free to, if you don't have any questions, Patrick, we can go to the final slide to share that contact information. And if folks have questions while I'm covering it, please put it in the Q&A or put it in the chat box at this point. Okay, I see a question.
Yeah, next question is, can you be a reviewer if you have an application under consideration in the EPA Community Change Grants Program, not the Thriving Community Program, outside of
Yeah,
Region 7?
great question. That does not introduce a conflict of interest within our program. Our team is not evaluating any of those applications and folks that are going to be involved in this program. So no, I don't foresee that being a conflict of interest, and yes, you can serve as a reviewer.
Next question is, I live and work in Tennessee, and I think my current employer could um, potentially submit a grant for the cycle. Do I need to recuse myself from the process entirely?
Great question. So the way it'll work is that each review cycle will be looked at one at a time. So if you are in the pool right now as an applicant and say this cycle, your company has not submitted your employer has not submitted an application. So then, yes, you're eligible to serve as a reviewer. If the following funding cycle your employer does submit, then yes, that does introduce a conflict of interest. So during during the accessibility or during our matching, all of the information that you're sharing with us, we'll use that to control for any conflict of interest.
Next question is, if you applied for the non-competitive grant, can you be a reviewer?
If you applied for a non-competitive grant. Sorry. I want to go back to I'm getting like chats. So if you applied for a non-competitive grant, can you be a reviewer? So regardless of the type of grant that you have applied for, you will not be eligible to be a reviewer during that funding cycle. And as I mentioned, there's going to be up to 10 funding cycles, and so 10 review cycles. And so while during that single funding cycle, you may not be eligible to serve as a reviewer. You will be eligible in other. Great question. Lots of great questions. I'm glad they're coming in. I was just about to end. So keep them coming. Okay. I spoke too soon. Well, um, feel free to stick around and answer the questions. Otherwise, I did want to say that we encourage you to share with anyone that was unable to register and attend for today's webinar. You've heard who's eligible and who we're looking for, so please share with your networks. And also, please check your emails and our web pages for additional updates. You can also follow us on our social media channels for the latest news and resources. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And I see more questions coming in, so we're not going to end yet.
The next question is, how will this freeze affect the program?
Great question. I'm going to let our Deputy Director, Christine.
All right, I see that question there. Yeah, so right now we are not affected by the freeze at the moment. So we are continuing this. The applications, the cycle closed last Friday for round one. And so we are actively reviewing those and looking forward to moving ahead with our external review for those competitive applications. So hence the current need for today's info session. If there are any effects or impacts to the program, that's where the stay connected is really important. So we're able to reach out to you. So we are waiting for, we are, receiving guidance along the way. So if there are any changes, we will let you know. But we do realize it's a fairly dynamic environment. Um, Please submit your information and express your willingness to serve. And we would love to have you be a part of this. And, we hope that we'll be able to get this funding out into the communities to really make a difference, because it is still needed. So just because there are differences in administrations, it doesn't mean that the challenges are going away. So please continue to engage and participate in this process. So we appreciate you.
Thanks, Christine.
Next
Yes,
question is, yeah, we have a new question. What states are covered in this region via this?
yes. Region 7 is covered by Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri. Did I already say Missouri? Christine,
Yeah, it's
I'm
the
missing.
four states.
Oh,
That's all
I
four.
got
Yes,
it.
yes. So we've confirmed.
I
Yes. Crystal
was
does a
like,
lot of
am I
work in
missing?
region 7, in region 4, so she could rattle off the 8. But yeah, you can see just like in our background there, we've got the four states there. So yeah, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri on that for region 7. So yep.
Thanks for challenging my geography,
Your afternoon check. So
but I passed.
We have a
Great
new
question.
question. Yeah. When will the applications for reviewers come out?
And the application. Oh, so you can expect that early next week. We will be sending those out. So please keep an eye out for our emails from TCGM_review at rti.org. If you don't see it by mid next week, reach out to us on our channels to let us know that you didn't get it, because our plan is to send it out early next week. Okay, folks. Well, thank you all for joining. I'm going to talk slow just in case someone is typing in the Q&A box or the chat. But thank you all for taking time to join this webinar and to learn about reviewers. Please share with your networks about this, because, you know, we will need reviewers, and the only way folks will know is by spreading the word. So thank you. Okay, Patrick, I think we could end it. Thanks, everyone.